All right, we're live. Money Never Sleeps, episode 11, with the great Sam Spratt and America's favorite body model, die with the most likes. This is a really special episode for me. I'm extremely excited to chat with Sam and Di. Sam and I first met in April at Carbone at my favorite event, Anonymous' Carbone dinner. And we got to talking about the space and Super Rare and some other stuff and hung again at Marfa. I'm super honored to have him on the show. Interestingly, Money Click, or it's now 452B, we have 85 tokens outstanding, 100 total. And at one point during the Monument game, independently, we held 22 of the players. Yeah, so I think we believe in Sam. I believe in Sam and Di, and so I'm super excited to hang. I wanted to kick it off, Sam. You know, I've watched some interviews with you, and you talk about this like moment in your life where you sort of were like, "Oh my God, I've kind of achieved a bunch, but lost everything in the process." And I had a similar moment in 2011. I was like, "Okay, I had everything I thought I should do. Like I was married, I had kids, I had a house, I had a good job, and I was super unhappy." And that was also a sort of springboard for me. So I'd love to kind of explore. Can you talk about sort of what that moment or that part of your life was and how it kind of kicked you off into the trajectory you are now?
I'm sorry to hear you had a similar experience because it's not
Yes.
fun while you're in it. I would say I got fairly fortunate right out of school, and while my first job did not necessarily like pay a lot of money, I was making like $20 an illustration. It did expose me to clientele relatively quickly, and after like 9 months of saving, I had stacked up around $5,000, and I moved to New York. I found a couple guys on Craigslist. I moved into their spare bedroom, and I started stacking up clients in kind of gaming, tech, eventually music, and I did a good 10 years in Brooklyn, where just by, I think, spreading my work and my process and the attempt at trying to, I guess, climb a client list almost, that felt like a logical metric to aim for. And with each one sort of stacking up the shared attention of whatever person I was working with. So like if I'm working with a musical artist, I get their fans and they kind of come my way. So they start like patting me on the back and telling me I'm doing a good job. When are you doing their next album cover? Things like that. And it over the course of those 10 years, I was able to, support myself, save money, hone my craft. But I was in the process managed to take something that should be, I think, like a raw extraction and expression of yourself, and I had basically become like a gun for hire and a bit of a mimic. Like I could adapt to whatever person I was working with.
A human receiving an AI prompt instructions and then putting out output almost.
It's not too far gone from there, really. So I had managed to make like a fairly cubicle style life for myself, even while doing what was supposedly like the freedom and financial freedom of being a quote unquote, within the metrics I understood at the time, successful artist. So stacking up a few years of that, letting those projects sort of define me, I was able to build like a pretty protective cocoon around myself of I'm doing a good job. I'm clearly doing a good job. People are telling me I'm doing a good job online. It must be true if the people on Reddit are saying that.
And I mean, you're not wrong there, dude. Like usually they shred stuff, so you're doing. But yeah.
But in the process, it's like you work jobs that are I would say on the more glamorous end of the spectrum of having clientele, and then you also do a bunch of like dirtier and uglier jobs that are being a freelance gun for hire that maybe pay a little bit more, give you a little bit more freedom to take something a little bit more passionate, and that is kind of a perpetual loop I think a lot of artists get stuck in, but I got like trapped in for a decade by my own creation, right? No one did that to me.
Quick aside, do you find that the stuff people think are glamorous ends up being glamorous? A lot of the time I've like met those people or done that stuff, and I actually find it's never glamorous, and sometimes the unglamorous stuff is actually the fun stuff.
I think what I mean by glamorous is like doing an album cover that shows up on Spotify and millions of people know that image, even if they don't know I did it, that just there is that thing that they are associating with something they're listening to, and maybe like, you know, they're all ultimately liking an entirely different artist. And it took me an embarrassingly long time to realize that they were not there for the album covers, that I was the front facade of a real artist. But you know, it's still like there is something nice about those album launches and releases, and your friends are like sending you screenshots of listening on Spotify. Like that is what like glamorous in this context means. It's like an acknowledgement that it's fun to see something spread at a wide level that most things within this space really never touch. But then the like downside of it is you are obviously so many layers abstracted from the source of the artistry. And that's just getting outside. That's not even like getting into the weeds of what a music label or say working for a game studio.
Your own creativity. By doing that, you're distancing from your own sort of source and creativity, and increasingly doing stuff for others makes it harder to get back in touch with it.
For sure. And you know, while you're in it, you write yourself a nice little story that I am being hired because of my story and my voice. But it really comes back to creep up on you later when you can kind of look through many things you've done, at least in my case, and I can remember what at the time felt like was being reached out to for my skills or abilities, when it was a little bit more my labor. Like it was not so much my vision as my ability to execute something. And then I would do my damnedest to put as much of myself into it as possible. And I think you can see that kind of screaming out from under bits and pieces of my commercial work over those 10 years. But it ultimately was always kind of confined into that box. But it's not to say that I have any like resentment towards any of those people whatsoever. Like those were crazy opportunities.
What I'm hearing is like a lot of the time I think change unfortunately comes from discomfort at the least, and pain or feeling a disconnect. And I think what you're outlining is like, look, I had a similar, like professionally, I felt very successful, but at the time increasingly disconnected from myself. And so I think, and like, as you said, creativity. So that's what's resonating a lot with me. And I'm hearing, which is, you know, a lot of the time too, when you get that stuff, a lot of people think you're going to feel your best. And that, you know, that's why I love to hear you speak about this. So that's how
it's like, totally, man. It's like following a meme, really. Is like I view my life in New York City as like I followed a meme before I knew what it meant. Is like be an artist in New York City. Like be a trope. There's not a
what you should
not a logical there's not a logical reason I need to be here. Technology has shifted. Those 10 years I was working with those other clients, maybe a few times within it, I like actually took advantage of the crazy chaos and nexus that is New York City. Most of the time I was alone in a small office and kind of terrified of the city and went nowhere within it. I did nothing. I took no advantage of it. My last few years, I've been taking massive advantage of it compared to how I ever did it before. But most of those 10 years, I had like followed a meme to be here, didn't really know why. And I kind of chart a good chunk of my career prior to Lucy as knowing that I wanted to get something out of me, but being so abstracted and removed from the process to actually get there that I let the accomplishments of others serve as the stepping stones for myself.
It's such a powerful message. And sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, it's interesting because I think we all go through it as artists at a certain point where like you start there's this like natural tendency for deviation for what you like, what your true like almost artistic form is. And as those things start to pile up and those layers tend to accumulate, it also becomes more and more painful to extract what you need, what you have to get out. And then extraction just becomes insane when like it feels like before it was so easy. Like you could just sit down and write 10,000 words in like, a week or something. And then, as you continue to like go down this path, you look at it and you're like, fuck, like I like, that prospect is in like the distance between, that time in your life that you were doing that and now is just so different. It's just such a weird, it's so weird. And I think that it's interesting that you had that happen is like, a full-time artist, and it must have been really peculiar to have it like sneak up on you almost because like, I feel like because I work a corporate job, like when I start to see things with the tendency to like with those two worlds colliding where I'm like, holy fuck, dude, if like that art world is starting to come in with the same like burden that my desk job is, something's got to change. But it must have been really weird as an artist because that's like both your livelihood and your job and your creative outlet. So it must have been like a weird obscuring, just, yeah, I don't know. I can't imagine. So it just sounds like an interesting time. And I think again, it's something that we all fuck with. It just like, it sucks to constantly be questioning yourself more or less.
Thank you. Well, you mentioned, Sam, I think in an interview you used the word when it changed when you looked at The Last Supper, you used the word confrontational in an interview, which for some reason was like really interesting to me. You said you went and saw the painting of The Last Supper and it was just there and it was you and it was a confrontational and that's sort of what triggered you. And I think, Guy, like you're saying, being so disconnected, I was laughing, by the way, you're like 10,000 words a week. You're like, I usually write 100,000 words a week and I can only write 10,000 now in 6 months and spit out like 100. But no, so I think we all go through that. And so you did mention this, like seeing The Last Supper and having the word confrontational just jumped out to me. And I'd love to explore that word and then how you kind of course, answer Die as well. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sidetrack, but I think it's the same kind of thing, like being disconnected. Yeah.
They're totally connected. Because I think rather than that, you begin from a place of you understand you are in an office or a corporate job, and there is like a box that is very visible right at the outset that you want to move in a direction of either expanding those walls and making them bigger depending on certain ambitions, or just breaking them and getting out of them. This was a much more like self-constructed box that was kind of not really apparent where
most people are like blocked in by their own beliefs.
Yeah, it's and it is reinforced by, I think, just a constant drive towards dissociation, where you are, or the place I got to was I was so removed from what do I want to say, do I have anything to say, what is the point of all of this time I had spent honing a technical skill like drawing and painting, and the most that I had to really contribute was say a Black Panther cover, or working for Red Dead, like that. And these are not to slam those creations whatsoever. It's just that ultimately those things are someone else's world, and at a certain point, you don't want to play in that one. You want to make one of your own and have other people play in it.
Yeah.
And so the confrontation that I think, especially the last few years, have been, whether it is that experience at Last Supper, which for me was more, everyone knows the painting, it's very famous. There's nothing overtly like special or profound that I felt from seeing the painting itself. It was just the way in which it was presented that's all you have in front of you. And so just by narrowing the focus, where you're not in a gallery or a museum where you can kind of walk through and check a bunch of boxes, which I felt was very indicative of how I handled a good chunk of my life as an artist, was checking boxes, stacking client lists, collecting paychecks, like accruing. I was a hoarder of, other people's dreams and money.
Outputs too. Like you want to achieve stuff for the output. You're like the checkbox. I achieved this. I achieved this. I achieved this.
Yeah. Which is, it's a trap of ambition. Like
And
where
society right now, I do feel that. I feel like for me, my whole life was geared towards outcomes. And when I finally shifted to hobbies and other things that were about the process and enjoying the process, it was the biggest change ever. So I feel you on totally. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm with you. I think like I don't actually have any opposition to the pursuit of outcomes. I think it's just when you expect outcomes to be delivered based on executing something that is another person's creation, and you emotionally invest yourself in that and think that you're going to feel and taste that like raw sinew of accomplishment, that you are like down to the metal of what a success looks like, when it is not actually birthed from you and you're just one component of it, and not even necessarily a driving component of it, but a secondary or afterthought, or in my case, the facade of it. Often I was doing the front covers of these accomplishments.
Trying to get what somebody else wants when it's not coming from you, trying to listen to somebody else and produce what they want when it's not consistent with what you want. This was a thing I had in business too. It's the most difficult thing and confusing, because they say, well, they think you can't know exactly what they want. So then you're putting out something, and even if you kill it, there's just some big, unless you're doing it from your own self, it just creates a very difficult thing to do. You're trying to please someone else, and it might not be what you would do. And so if it doesn't work out, you're like, well, I was doing something somebody else wanted me to do. And if that makes sense.
It does. But I also think that like that is extremely valuable. Like I learned an enormous amount from all the people that I was making one part of their world. Like all of that is, I am so insanely lucky that anyone would even bother to like give a little bit of a break in my life where they could pay me a certain amount, and suddenly I don't have to think about rent for a month, while I get to like learn how to make this one thing better. And maybe one day I can take that skill and stack that money, and when I'm ready, I can break out of it. And that's basically what happened. It just took a little longer than I would have liked. And in the process, I was so hyper focused on that accrual, which to me is like a very like gamer mentality of just like leveling up based on like the dumbest metrics possible. just like the like lowest form of a stat tree. And I pursued a lot of this that way. And so when you like get to a point where the once solid ground of life may be like a career that people tell you you're doing a fine job at, a relationship that you've convinced other people is perfectly stable and fine, friendships that are not as deep or as profound as they're a circle of people, but the actual like strands of connectivity suddenly reveal themselves to be like pretty fraught. That when one bit of that collapses down, if you have built a protective cocoon as I did around myself and ego, it just everything unspools all at once. And so there was not like, oh, I'm down in this one way. It was just the breaking down of I think confronting my art led to the breaking down of any other pillar of what one could call life. But that is fertile grounds to work with. It's just really messy while you're in it.
Yeah. Damn, dude. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, like, and there's just no worse feeling in the world than creating something and feeling constant. It's just like I tend to use this a lot because it's the most accurate term, I think, as an artist that also is a term for Pepto-Bismol, but like the constipation, like what if you can tell when somebody has created something that is a constipated creatively, like, and they're just going through the motions and it's just making it to again fulfill some purpose. And it's just like it's wild to think that like that thing, it's just, I don't know, like in some ways, the manufacturing plant that is like attention commodity and like just everything that kind of happens here on X and everything else. It's just it's kind of weird and fascinating. The tendency for that, I think. I don't know. I feel it sometimes for sure, where I'm just like, fuck, what am I even doing? What am I making here? And who's this actually for? And it's something that you have to wrestle with quite a bit. I think probably other people do too. There's no worse feeling in the world. OG is it, like when you're just sitting there and you have that Procreate canvas up or your canvas in the basement or whatever, and you're just spewing shit onto it. And you're just like, yeah, this is awful. Like, this is a fucking terrible piece, but I'm just going to launch it out there because I don't know, senseless vanity, transaction addiction, whatever it is. It's fucking wild.
Yeah. So you are operating on a degree of output that I have no common connection to. And
I've never
like truly, you put so much work out. Like, you are ultimately like a far better real-time commentator on what humans are going through than I am, right? I bury away for a long time, and I hope what is on the other side of all the constipation, as you put it, is like a sweet release. But it is not like a guaranteed thing. And there's something, I think, like, I think Beeple operates in like that similar space of rather than like a one big thing, it is this constant drip. But through that, like, just from watching your output closely for, I'd say, like the last year, I've also watched like what is consistent also kind of grow and slip into these like very terrifying branching new directions that like you're just like, just one day it's poking a little bit over here and you don't know whether it's like you're just going to stop that one path and finally break away into the new. But it is like very visible that at certain points you get sick of yourself and you are like, I'm ready to see what else I am, and then you like go back. And I do this constantly, so it's like I think it is part of that process of just making art. Being a human is we are all our worst enemies, and so we are doomed to like repeat our worst tendencies. And yet I think like the best thing we possibly could ever hope to say or translate is like hidden somewhere in there. And so that like there's something to mine in the ritual.
Yeah, it's almost like a reaction to that hatred of self or of the creation that you made. In some ways, like there was like, I remember, it's so funny you said that, man, because there was like, I posted something that was like just horrifically sad. It was like a poem I'd written or something, and somebody was like, this is really off brand. And I'm like, it really isn't. Like, this is what I want to.
It was brilliant. The one 2 or 3 days ago, like, where you put about, it was totally like a
the old.
Yeah, it was incredible though. Dude.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Well, it's like, Well, it's just funny, like the perception of like what it takes to create versus like the creation itself. And like, like it is weird to have, it's like, I think, it's a blessing to have so many indulge in your creations, but it's also a terrifying prospect to have like shit assigned to something that may or may not be there, like, it's like, oh, that like there is like so much more nuance to this than just than just a fucking Prada meat bag or something. But it's just.
Ty, you're on, like, if you want to do constipation, you're on like steroid laxative, and the amount of as Sam said, there's like probably only two. I've never seen almost anyone with the amount of outcome. And you used to do a lot more of that DMs. That's when I first. You don't share the DMs where you used to fuck with people in DMs, those long things. Remember?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot more. And I'm with you, Sam. And I do think a couple things. First, authenticity. I don't know. There's some human innate way we can look at something and do the authenticity. I totally agree, Sam. Dai's unique in this, like, he just has to vomit out, and then it's always so creative and reflective. Like, he's, to me, the greatest satirist of the space. Like, he just immediately has a take on everything. And obviously, like, before you meet him, if you didn't know him, you'd be like, this guy is either a fucking axe murderer or like, I didn't know what to make. And then you meet him, and he and his wife are like the two sweetest people ever. And I like to say this, I like to have one shirtless post. He's like all shredded up too. He's like, he does F45. You'd never guess. So anyway, Sam, so that's, so I totally look, I'm obviously a collector and have made art. I hate everything, my rap. I hate it all. Like I'm not, of course, not likening myself, but I'm likening the creative process that I find it just super difficult. I actually almost think too, if you've done something great, the pressure on you is actually way harder, because if you're like Sam or Di and you guys like, and the pressure, it's sort of also to be consistent with what you've done. Now, what's interesting, and I'd like to raise with both of you, is Sam, it seems like from out the gate, you just had this vision, man. Like a lot of artists, like some have, early style and stick with it. Some who are great, like ACK, has evolved over time and, and that's been one way. The two of you, in their own way, like Sam, it's interesting because I think and I want to talk about some other stuff around this, but you have this sort of monumental focus, on the Monument game. And I jumped out with this style and approach that is with across 6 books, DM assaults on the regular, of barfing out incredible pieces like by the fucking minute. And so I'd like to talk to both of you because, like, look, I only say stuff because it's me trying to connect experience. And as a collector, I started looking and using all the tools so that when I saw an artist's work, I knew, like, yo, is this a stock image or feature? Can you just do this easily? In the process, I started making, my own art. And I rap, and it's nothing but. So I've been through that process, and the biggest and hardest thing for me actually is to find a style. And so what I'd love to discuss with the two of you is, obviously in different ways, and Sam, it's just like, the fact you guys have, one of the hardest things is to have an authentic, unique, immediately recognizable style that is sort of original and consistent and allows you to still branch out. So I'd love your thoughts on how you got there. What's that like? Do you agree with that? Sam, both of you, like, your take on that.
Oh, and real quick, layering on top of that for Sam, well, because it's in that same realm of questioning, like, I see the way that your pros kind of come together on Twitter, and like, you're obviously a writer. I would love, so in that same creative process, are you ultimately letting words dictate brush and vice versa? Are they happening concurrently? How do those two play together in your overall creative process? Because it seems like both are pretty heavily used.
Yeah, I think everything begins, at least as far as what's extracted, in written form, and usually not in a like very concrete manner, way more word vomit, soups, little random thoughts that are eventually pieced together. You find the things in your life that start rhyming with each other, and it just, you're in the goal always, especially with Lucy, is when you have a violent moment in your life of total upheaval and you basically realize that you've missed the whole fucking point, and you start over, and you like kind of like actually have to start over, but you have to hold on to every mistake you ever did, and you can't actually truly memory hole your most embarrassing things that you've done. They're there. But you also are taught in that same moment that if you flog yourself for this and don't just remedy it, it is a masturbatory exercise. You are like actively dishonoring the design of the lesson that you are like learning. If you get stuck in just the doomerism of observation, where like it's a beautiful opening. Like the moment, the first time I ever saw your work, I was like, okay, we're looking at the same thing. This this is very nice. And I didn't have one moment of wondering like, are you an axe murderer? Because I actually was like, the feeling I get from looking at your work, Di, is I feel a sense of camaraderie and companionship of you are comfortable dissecting a liminal space of Americana that is at times terrifying, suffocating, and most people have no idea how to get out of.
Right, for sure. Right. Yeah.
Where style comes after is like to go back to like the client list days is I was often asked like make something in this style, right?
Like a style guide. You were given a style guide basically, right?
In some capacity, or like inspired by a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and then a little bit of you, and try to mix all these things up in a pot. You know, like the amount of movie poster-esque things that are vaguely Drew Struzan, because that was just what was like cast to me. And because I genuinely admired his work when I was young, is like, I'm not thinking, oh, I'm what an insane concept to take on an assignment so obviously in the shadow of someone who created a path for himself. I'm thinking maybe one day I'll be that, which is like the suffocating first step of being an artist is mimicry. It's like copying. You try to be like the thing that you've seen, but then you see more things, and then you try to be like those, and then they start gooping into each other, and it just becomes this like paint slopped into paint. And if you're doing it right over time, it just like you siphon and filter out the obvious, and you start getting into something that is more yourself. But I think like a violent or confrontational moment in your life where you feel a like true raw edge, and it's not just observing the world from afar, but you put yourself out there into something, and then it slapped you, and it broke you down, and it showed you your hideous self, and you now have to like look at that place and then do something with the feeling. For me, I think like anyone who has experienced any form of like love, death, tragedy, grief, you name it, it splinters in all different directions, and all can kind of take you to the same place. But it's I draw it most closely similar to like, okay, one of my closest friends just had his first kid, and I have two older brothers, and I've gotten to like see their children get raised, but I've never had someone that I'm seeing on such a regular basis, from like literally a few hours old to watching like those early stages of development. And there was something so crazy about holding that baby for the first time, where you see its eyes, like it is viewing the world as like latent noise. Like it is all just like globs of nothing that it is trying to formulate, but it couldn't if it tried. It's not meant to do that quite yet. But then you like come back a couple weeks later, and then suddenly you can see just by the way it's like looking around the room, or when a sound happens, something in it is focusing, it's sharpening. But at that like raw edge of your life, where everything is noise, you see the design of the whole thing. And then for me, because we all go to that exact same place, no matter our story, all of Lucy and the style was born from, look, it's always going to be like a facsimile. I can acknowledge that. It's always going to be like a bullshit attempt to try to take something that is like objectively true that we all know, but it feels like a really worthwhile and very difficult challenge to try to bring back that slippery feeling where everything once solid is vibrating. And that to me is like trying to extract from a place we know, and then using the skills I have and the flaws I have, which is many. When you look at like the Lucy paintings in particular, those are like the only things that I think are representative and indicative of me attempting this in at least what I would call like the right direction.
Man,
is you
yeah.
you can see all of my neuroses, all of my fixations, all of my obsessions. Like they're all laid bare for you, but it's like the style is formed through the undeniable things in me, both good and bad, that I can't control, but they are there.
Mm-hmm.
Bro, I
Well,
love that shit. I love
well
how
that
it's
yeah.
amazing.
Well then I mean it's no mystery or whatever the work. I mean it's like the work was insane. I mean like you can see the depths of depravity and sadness and happiness and redemption in the piece itself. But I almost like the piece is insane. But I just felt like even looking at the you're talking about shadow and creating some type of your own shadow. I just thought that like people finding reprieve in the shadow of that piece was the most beautiful part of all, because it's like I was looking at these people who were putting shit out there that was very clearly like that it spoke to them, it massaged something in them that turned something loose, and again relieved some constipation,
Yeah.
it seemed, from like in a therapeutic fashion, where they said like, look, I can put something fucking heavy out here and have it be a strand on this beautiful piece. I was just like, it was just such a celebratory moment, I feel like, for everyone out there that was experiencing it, because it was just like, this is something that, and you've heard it before, but it really truly did like transcend the space for a while, and it was such a nice, I think everyone found reprieve in that shade, because sometimes you're toiling away in this fucking porta potty that we have to exist in, and you need to bring your head up for some air at a certain point. So to see the beautiful prose, the Mary Pat and Ned exchange that happened in there, the like,
Yeah.
I can't even think about the other ones. There was like a crazy 9/11 story that somebody posted in there that was like gnarly as fuck, and like you saw these things that were just like brutal, and it was every emotion too. It was like the comedy in Brian Brinkman's post that was just like a real estate listing, like there was everything. So it was just so cool to see not only every human emotion kind of portrayed within the creatures themselves, but then as creatures ourselves, we're portraying every emotion unprompted. It was like people took whatever they wanted from it. It was very fucking cool.
Well, and that's one interesting thing. I mean, one of the things I think about a lot and we discuss a lot is like participation of collectors in the process and what's possible. And both of you have various ways of doing that. I mean, I think Dai's super incredibly successful Marfa event was like transformational. Sam, look, I look at things like how well my pan piece did, and it was people felt attached just because they clicked a button. And I look at QQL where people can pick tons of different things, and that has like, so I think it's very interesting, this balance of how to get participation. And I agree with you. Some of the feedback, I love Ben Scar. I mean, this guy is incredible. And I just think some of these pieces of feedback, and I know Ned and Marion, this was a very inventive and daring undertaking. And I look at your launch, the skulls, and hearing you speak about them, like, look, from the beginning, you have been on this path of like interacting with your collectors and using this medium as a way to be very in touch. How do you, undertaking something of that scale, how do you feel about now looking back? What are your observations and what do you hope? I'm hearing you and it resonates. It's so, one of the things when you go through pain is hearing somebody else talk about a similar way. It oddly makes your pain less because it feels less personal. It feels more of a shared experience. And that's why I often like to share stuff, because I think it like makes the pain you feel more useful to others, more connecting. And so anyway, you've poured yourself into this and you undertook something where, I mean, look, there's been some wonderful jobs that have done some wonderful things. The level of participation, both from players and non-players, the level of emotion from some of the people that I know close to me, like when they submitted their observations, like some of them were really banged up, like it meant everything to them. So tell me a little bit about how you kind of got to this idea. I've heard you speak about it, but like, how do you think it? Maybe I'll take a different take. Versus what you'd hoped, how did it go? And since it's over, what are your observations about what's been happening in the community since?
That was a lot to.
Sorry, is that too much?
Steve, no, in a good way. I appreciate it, guys. All in a very good way.
I just thought it was a pretty vast undertaking, you know?
Yeah. So all of Lucy is a refracted self-portrait, right? It is like very obviously based on what I have felt, what I've experienced. But like I talk about this with anyone that is ever like curious about, how do you inject more of yourself into something? I think there's this like weird tendency most people have that is like trauma dump, like literally just like vomit your trauma onto everything. And it's not really the answer because it all. And it's like obvious it's not the answer, but there is like a logical impulse that's like, well, I have this mental disorder and this mental disorder and this happened to me and this happened to me. And so if I give myself all of these identifiers and then lay those things bare to everyone, then I will receive some sort of sense of companionship. And I think that the opposite is true. It is a very alienating thing because it's kind of a narcissistic practice. And so like, look, ultimately making any body of work has a little bit of narcissism in it, no matter what, like objectively. But the goal of Lucy is to refract the other people that I have met and their experiences, where I know that the thing that felt so heavy, so earnest, so fucking in my feelings, that it's like a joke now. Like it's funny. It's funny that I ever felt something that deep and that emotional. And like, it's not to discard it or say like that was bad or weak or whatever. It's just to say that like, it wasn't special and that is good. And
it's a message of hope. It's a message of elevation. Like, hey, all this terrible stuff, and you can come out, in my opinion, like sharing it as a message to elevate.
Well, you have to do something with it, right? And I think there are so many things that you can point at this world so easily. I mean, look, I live in New York City, man. Like, if I wanted to just point at all of the dark and demonic things here, I do not need to walk very far, and it is palpable. It is everywhere. Right. But that exercise, the longer I've been here, and the more that I think experienced some of that myself, it becomes then like more of the quest to find the light in it. Like as ridiculous as that sounds, it's just like, great. Okay. You've acknowledged that the world is filled with like selfish people and their motivations can be treacherous at times. This is not new. This is not novel. This is opening your eyes at most. And now, what from your own experience can you like pull out to first and foremost, like help yourself, like, and by doing that, ideally build something strong enough or compelling enough with enough gravity around it that other people could be helped in the process. And I think like all things that come from like a deep empathetic and emotional place of like wanting to help others that has not addressed your like root issues, and that's not part of the quest. It falls apart so fast, and it's like very comical how treacherous and even insipid some of the attempts at kindness to others that have not yet tried to do any of that for yourself become. There's no like sustainability in it whatsoever. It is very fragile ground. So with Lucy being an attempt to try to like whatever I'm experiencing, it is ultimately I'm only going to bother to paint this. I'm only going to bother to like write or share these prose that come with it if it is something that I know is not just a masturbatory exercise, but also I know is like there's at least one other person out there
Yeah.
that like where that, and it's not a desire to pander to the viewer. It's a desire to like I did most of my life like absolutely atomized and alone. Like I absolutely hid from all of it. The greatest, weirdest path to realizing you should connect yourself to a network was receiving my first Ethereum. It was the first time I and it feels psychotic, and yet it makes total sense to me. It was the first time in my life money was not just something that I stacked and hid away, but that I was one very, 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 very tiny piece of an undulating organism of vibes and moods and sentiments connected to both real and fake things. Both the manipulation and the attempt to create within it. And I think once you're in that and you feel less like alone and abstract, but you are undulating with everyone else, even if you can't control it all, it then refocuses it of like, well, I can only control me. So what am I going to do with that? And then the year-long project of the Monument game begins, because it is with the skulls and the one-of-ones. I've shared my story. I've put my technique into something that is my own. I have connected other people to myself and to each other. I have watched people profit and make money off of me that they were able to use for real things in their life. And instead of seeing them selling this with judgment, I could see this as you entered into my path and got something out of it. I hope that serves you well. And you have given me a little bit of energy in the process that is now my responsibility to honor that gift and do something worthwhile for it. And at a certain point, I was just like, how do I spread the things that I missed the most in the world with people? I did 30 years of life feeling like I just was not paying attention. And so to build the Monument game, to exert a year of my life into both the painting and the system around it, designed to look very closely, to slow down and shut out the noise and be confronted with something that you can tell undeniably I'm in it. Like it just, I don't have to sit there. There's all kinds of things that I could do better, that I know, but I know with confidence that when you look at it, I gave a lot of shits to make that thing happen. And if you can feel that from me, maybe I can get you to slow down and give me a little something back. And by give me, it is mostly, I'm going to exert all this energy. You're going to participate either through sharing, through collecting, whatever that may be, and you're going to give me energy back in a new form. I am going to use that. You hopefully have looked at my track record and know I'm going to use that as well as possible. And in that time, I hope you are able to get something intangible out of it, even for a time. And maybe you do it, you leave your mark, and then you're done with it and you part ways. So be it. What I learned the most from the process was that people are just not what they seem. Like in a healthy way. Like it was nothing necessarily new, but I had never had a liquid collection in my life before. Like the one-of-ones have never resold. The skulls move very infrequently and almost universally in like an upward trajectory so far. And so the idea of suddenly having 250 people who their first introduction to my world and Lucy, my story, is to leave a piece of themselves behind after a year of my efforts, it's hard to not have like some degree of like emotional attachment to what is otherwise transactional of how could you leave me, man? Like I laid it all on the table for you. But it's like I say all this with it's like a thought that enters your head, and like any good trip where you like have like a insecurity come in your head is like before you can even tell it to your friend, you've resolved it because it's like not worth your time and it's out. And so the week one, as my wife Rachel and I kind of talk about it, is like we did the whole arc of the grief cycle. We learned what it was to have an ecosystem of people that behaves like a little bit of like a jungle, where you have where you need the full spectrum of it, but you have people that they came in to the Monument game, they gave their all to it, they put their realist selves into these fragments. They were thinking at a time scale similar to how I am. They understood the preservation layer of the blockchain, and that the idea of leaving something behind meant maybe I should leave a note to my child. Maybe I should leave a note to someone who passed. Maybe I should leave a reminder to myself, a marker to don't go back here. Like, just, it's like, put your embarrassing bad talk about yourself out there it's for all to see, so that you like just don't do it again. There was that. So you got like the believers, the people that are like most, let's say, contributory to the game. And then you had people who maybe just saw me as a good long-term investment. Maybe they saw me as a good short-term investment. And maybe they view me as entirely discardable and disposable. That there are parasites, there are soil, there are fungi, that all of the little things that make up like an undulating ecosystem are necessary, and you can't really look at any one bit of it with any kind of judgment. You obviously, there's the ones that like feels good to get sun on your face through the gaps in the canopy, but like everything else does its thing, and I think reckoning with that and learning to not just see it or observe it, but actually like love and be grateful for it, was like a really intense week for Rachel and I. And so, you know, Rachel, between the two of us, she is the one that is like taking a chaos of thoughts and feelings, and she is organizing it, and she's charting it, bringing structure to it. And so all of those feelings from that week and through everything that has occurred since, we have like an amazing record keeping of that shows this movement of not just participation in the game, like the words, but like feelings we had through people's actions outside of it. And it's like helpful for us. It's not just like a data set to do something with. Sorry, what was that?
Yeah, I always say, like, when people are trying to monitor how they feel, take a real time, like write down intermittently like how you're feeling, because looking back, you'll never remember it correctly. So that's incrable that you did that.
Yeah, I mean, I credit that to Rachel for sure.
Badass, man.
She is the best.
Like, I had a little time with her and Marfa. I within 5 seconds, because like, as somebody, I've worked with family before, and I was like, oh, I'll be curious, and I met her. I within like literally 2 minutes, I was like, oh my god, I totally get this. She's incredible. So,
thank you, man. No, and I appreciated also your what you said to both of us, that you like getting in with the wives early, because everyone else ignores them and doesn't see their power and their role and the thing that is helping any of us remotely function in the world.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Super important.
And I love what you said about the vitality of parasite nature too, because like I think that's something that a lot of us deal with here. Like, I mean, some days you're sitting there and you're like, why the fuck is this person shitting? Like, why the fuck is this random person here shitting all over me? Or like, just like, you know, more or less existing is a skin tag on our collective sagging ass, and like just dragging fucking shit, or, you know, fucking just like, just doing that. And it's just like, dude, like, wouldn't that time be better spent, you know, making something, or, you know, just doing something, even having like some type of constructive criticism at some point, versus just a purely, you know, diarrheal skid mark or whatever. But I think you're right, like in the sense that that everything that kind of inherits or inhabits this, you know, creature that we're all limbs on, you know, there's a purpose for everything and everyone. And sometimes, you know, those parasites are fuel. Those parasites, you know, you can feed from them and get energy that same way and stuff. So it's a really interesting point. And I think it's something that like people get really fucking bummed out about it. I know I do. Like, I think a lot of artists, like, I'm
Artists,
sensitive as fuck. So like when people get like all nuts, I'm just like, dude, what the fuck? I'm just trying to like make stuff and like be chill or whatever. But I think that's a really interesting point, something that should be focused on a little more, that, you know, we're more or less soil, and like the things that are happening within the soil, you know, everything is doing something regardless of if we know what it actually is or what kind of purpose it is actually serving.
Well, you subject yourself to it more than I do, because you no, and this isn't a criticism. It's like by nature of releasing work every day, and that work being reactive to what is occurring in the world and space. You know, it invites discourse, right?
It does.
I could not be happier to speak to like two beautiful gentlemen that I know are just really good people. But like generally speaking, like I don't really do a lot of spaces. I don't engage in discourse on Twitter or anything. Like, doesn't mean I don't see it or notice it. It's just that like I am my work, the thing that makes it the best is if I hide away and I hone it.
Yeah.
And I fight myself for big long stretches of time in private, and I emerge with something to share for people to contribute on or enjoy. And there are like downsides to that too, because it's also you do remove like in the Monument game, for example, ours, like my ideology, my like beliefs around the world are all over that thing. Like but to me, that's a good home for them. It is a
that speak for you.
Emotions. Yeah. Right. And with that is like any fire or heat is directed at those big exertions. And so like whatever I'm going through along the way, you know, you said before about, you know, when perhaps like when you slip off from the more, let's say, editorial observation illustrations and into the more, let's say, what I would call like almost like cosmic horror paint extractions, is that some people are like confused or uncomfortable with that. Well, to me, like they're so obviously from the exact same source and exact same kind of person. You know, whatever. Like if that is the perception of someone, what purpose does that actually like serve you? And for me, subjecting yourself to letting that in is detrimental to making the thing that you know you have to get out of yourself, which is usually how do I quiet that cosmic dread? Like I have to get rid of it. For me, I have not found a way to like get rid of it with a daily, so to speak. Like it has to be through large and convoluted and exponentially that way, because I think like I love connecting to this network, but as a fairly solitary person who spends the time making the stuff, learning to connect to the network and connect to other people, and how do I like actually support them and help them and be like the right degree of empathetic without like being a weird servant to them, like to create a beautiful space between us where the exertion is hopefully right? Enough for someone to believe I have their best interests at heart, but that ultimately I am not here for anything but to create, and that creation, the more I am able to be in that space, the more anyone who does enjoy this will probably enjoy it more, if that like strange parasocial relationship doesn't like slip into an unhinged territory.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that makes a lot
by
of
the
sense.
way, are you have strict time constraints or no?
No, we're fine.
No, I'm good. I can do another half hour, but
yeah, if you guys want to keep going, I usually don't do this, but I feel like if you're cool, I'm loving it. Yeah, we can do 15 minutes, 30 minutes, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Dad. Go ahead, brother.
No, I was just gonna say, it's funny that new Summer Wagner collection. Have you seen that yet, Sam and OG?
I absolutely have. It's phenomenal.
Yeah, like I was like spending a lot of time thinking about it last night, and I wrote a short thing, just kind of that I wasn't even sure that it should exist in some ways or something, because it was so nuanced and emotionally, like it was really impossible to describe. But it's funny that you kind of suggested, this transferal of power or energy. And like, do you have like, Summer and I have talked at length about just being obsessed with power lines. Like, just, you're out and you're driving on like a rural, remote road, or you're out in nature and there's just this huge fucking hulking power line there, creating energy for something that you have no idea what it is. It could be doing nothing. And it's just, I don't know. I was just reflecting on that a little bit. It's just kind of an interesting, I guess, what's the word? Like, just parallel for also, like, again, the transference of energy that you talk about with Monument Game, and with us as creators and OG collectors, or, you yourself have become a creator. I don't know. You guys have any thoughts on just power lines? Like, I know it's a kind of vague question, but they're kind of
I
power lines, or just power lines, both literal and figurative?
Just power lines, like, yeah, the ones that you just see.
Well, I'm a nerd, so right out of school, I was like, did stock research, and I got hired I did like these boring industries, packaging, so on. And after a year, I got a chance to launch stock research on the independent power producers of California. And so I actually studied all these companies and studied the power system in America. So when I see them, I'm such a dork. I'm thinking about like all the transmission inefficiencies and the markets. The other thing for me is I'm a big believer in beauty and your eyes needing to see beauty and new things to create.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, power lines often are such a visible sign of distortion of like nature or whatever.
Right.
So I think your analogy, I think one of the nicest feelings and hardest feelings in this society now is like, look, when you have a phone now, everybody in a way expects to be able to reach you all the time.
Yeah.
Around the clock. And even when I try to take a day, there was a 2-year period where the people around me, when I first, like maybe a year and a half, when I was first super into NFTs, they were basically like, look, I can't stand you. You're on your phone the whole time. And so I think for me, when I'm like trying to think about how can I disconnect and escape, when I'm driving and I see those power lines, they almost feel like, a sort of physical manifestation of this, like it's being pulled back to this world. And so I like to be and go see areas untouched. And I find the power line is usually the sort of, not to make such a big deal of it, but the thing that kind of like, takes allows often like ruins my view of nature. So I hate to be, but that's sort of what.
No, for sure.
Like a geek, or I'm like, God, I got to get away from this stuff, like, because it's reminding me.
Yeah.
Okay. When I went to Marfa, Rachel and I flew into Midland.
Same with us, yeah.
Yeah, and like I'm curious your thoughts on Midland, but like I love driving through that. Seeing all the oil fields and the fracking, like it's amazing. It's absolutely stunning, because like we often are so like removed from this stuff, and especially like being in New York City, you're so removed from like the production of the thing that makes everything run, and it's like you're in the heart, like it is like pumping blood for everything that the power lines touch at one point. And instead of like viewing this thing from like a weird like environmental lens of judgment around it, it's kind of just like absolutely magnificent that we are like plunging into the earth and pulling it out, and then we are like pulling it up into these towers and spreading these networks far and wide that are then letting us use these computers, which are letting us build. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
exactly.
I mean, like burning old like space.
Dude, you're dead. Yeah.
Yeah,
I was
it's hard not to be in awe of it, even with the like everything has its counterpoint, and so there's obviously like ramifications of all of this, but you know, I don't think that should like remove you from just seeing the beauty that it's all there. And I think for me, the way of taking, let's say, the concept of the power line, the concept of the generator, and the oil field and all of that, and kind of like injecting it into the system or market around Lucy, is I think I have come to a place that I wish I had realized earlier, but obviously try not to beat myself up over, that the more control that I have to try to create something that has openings that could spread power somewhere else,
Right.
that I can actually direct it in a way that I understand, and it's not just shotgun blasted out, or like maybe even more apt in this space is like t-shirt cannon into crowd out,
Yeah.
is like when it is targeted. Like I have found so far, I grow, they grow. Like it
Yeah,
it
right.
is way more of a symbiotic relationship, and it's harder because it requires, I think, more than anything, like trust and loyalty.
Yeah.
And those things are most
Short
precious
supply.
commodities. But you know, when you get it, whether with your partner or your dear friends or anyone willing to kind of like help you, like I view most of the collectors that I have, or people that have helped me make like my trailers or the music for them or anything like that, like all of them at its core, I don't see as, oh, they're all looking for like an opportunity to use or take something from me. I
Right.
see it as
Yeah.
like they have something to teach me if I bother to
Yeah.
to learn from it. And what they have to teach me is rarely connected to the transaction, either from me to them, to like, let's say, pay my employee or contractors, or the percent that I would give to a platform, as much more if I direct something with enough like confidence and belief in it, and put forth my best intention, can I also actually get that out of them? And then we start getting into this like beautiful little dance where it's just like you're no longer clocking into anything. You are driven and hungry to kind of like bite at each other's heels. Like I think like the power line leads to competition amidst yourself and amidst others in a healthy way. Like when it is, at least so far, I have not had to like deal with this in context of malice or jealousy or anything like that. So I haven't seen what obviously does happen in many situations where things can begin from those like beautiful symbiotic friends, pack of wolves running through the forest situation, and then you know they start eating their own. I haven't had to experience any of that yet on the Lucy journey so far, but it's not out of a lack of like, I'm still connected to a network of now hundreds of people who I don't know what all they want from me.
Right.
And
Yeah.
right. And
Sorry, yeah. Or is that it?
By not knowing what anyone actually wants from me, it creates sort of a place where I can either get hung up on that of trying to predict all of those things and trying to meet all of those things.
It's impossible.
Exactly, especially as the number grows, right? Or trust that there is, so long as my feeling towards each of them is, I know that I can just follow my compass, like, but it's not simple. Like this is much different after having players in the ecosystem than when it was just the council. Like it is especially those that like gave very vulnerably to the Monument game. It does create like a different dynamic of empathy, but it's I just try to stay focused on. I know anyone that does this, all I feel towards them is like just the stupidest amount of like love and gratitude.
Yeah.
That if they, I don't think anyone is walking around thinking the way in which I'm going to convey that is by being pen pals with everyone. I think the way most people know the way I'm going to convey that is I am going to take every bit of energy and I'm going to throw that shit like absolutely crazy into whatever I do next.
Yeah.
One thing that's come up a lot on this show and I wrestle with is, I think, and you said this, Sam, and I know Di, we talk about this all the time, and in our society, we're so disconnected from everything, from the food on our plate to the clothes, like everything just appears. And even look at this, most people, like, to me, going to these in real life events is like, if you're not doing it, I always say you're missing the best part. Increasingly, I find my life is lived through, not having connections. One of the ways we've talked about in your art, one of the ways I've switched is I've moved to all hobbies where the process is actually the joy, and the sort of old targeted output, is great. But regardless of that, if I've done my best and given it my all, I feel so much better. So I switched to all these hobbies like gardening and having chickens and beekeeping and things where the everyday interaction connects. So I think this is really interesting. We sort of danced around this issue a lot in various ways of how it's impacted us. So it's connecting and with the players, the expectations that come along with that, the pressures, how to do it. It's really interesting to just observe,
Yeah.
I'd love for the two of you, if you have any directions you want to take towards the end of our conversation here, any questions or anything we haven't explored. I have, of course, more to ask, but
right. Well, that was a beautiful sentiment. I think that may be a good spot to end it too.
Yeah.
It doesn't I thought that was great. Like, I don't really have shit else, but we could go for hours, but I think that was a solid wrap, dude. Honestly.
Well, I did promise viewers one thing. Given that Sam is viewed as the new Van Gogh, I promised everyone he's going to cut his ear off at the end of the show in Di's honor. But I guess we can't make that happen.
That's perfect, dude. Yeah, let's do it.
You did it. Right? Yeah, here we go, baby. Yes. You asked, we deliver on Money Never Sleeps. Yeah, I just want to say it was such a joy speaking with you, as always. Di's one of my best homies in the space and getting to know him. And Sam, honestly, selfishly, it's such a joy to hear you speak and feel such a connection to how you and Di both have a gift for words and art that it is so elevating and connecting and authentic. And so I just want to say, for me, it's such a joy and look forward to more time with you. And as always, Di, you're my homie. Love having you, and you're always a joy. So thank you. Love having you guys, and Money Never Sleeps.
Thank you all. Yeah, cheers. I'll see you all in Miami.
Yeah, we'll see you in Miami. You guys will stay around for 1 minute after, Sam?
Sure. Yeah, for sure.
Later.
Thank you guys.
Later. Yeah, thank you. This is awesome. Yeah.